The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast without the breaks and commercials. Now, here's host Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. This is Dom Geneva, your host, every Saturday right here on News Radio Wham 1180. And like I like to remind you, our past shows are on NoNonsenseRoundtable.com. And if you want to hear our show from last week, it was about Bob Duffy, and Bob talked about, mainly about public safety in the venue that he was a police chief and mayor of the city of Rochester. And keeping in that law enforcement venue, we have Greg McCaffrey with us today, who is the district attorney of Livingston County. So welcome back. I think the last time you were on was actually a couple of years ago.
Several years ago, Dom, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know, the topic of public safety, especially we're getting into an election year, it's becoming more and more important. And there's so many things that have changed since the last time you were on the show. And, you know, it's like that line from Law and Order, you know, the two equally important groups that are protecting the public is the police department and sheriff's department that arrests people, and then the people that prosecute people. And you have to have a relationship back and forth, but you have an awfully more challenging life than you had years ago.
Oh, absolutely correct. I mean, I was fortunate. I first became an attorney back in 2002, started my career as an assistant district attorney in Rochester under Howard Rellin. Things have changed significantly since 2020, most specifically when New York State changed criminal justice reform, both in the way of discovery and also bail reform. So, yeah, there's been significant and prominent changes the last 3 or 4 years that have greatly impacted how myself, my fellow prosecutors, and all of law enforcement do our jobs.
Well, I guess, you know, some of this stems from the George Floyd thing from years ago. I got that. But even way before that, before the show, you were talking about this explain the genesis of this bail reform thing from years ago.
Sure. And Dom, I think the biggest thing is New York State, obviously large, 62 counties. Our upstate, Western New York versus downstate, the 5 boroughs, significantly different environments. Probably within the last 7-8 years or so, 5 counties within New York State were part of a lawsuit in which they felt as though defendants were underserved or underrepresented. We found downstate that a lot of people were sitting incarcerated in county jails and holding facilities without having access to either attorneys or courtrooms. So the state underwent a pretty aggressive review of how things are done, how legal services are given to those charged with crimes. And I think in the last 4 or 5 years, that impact has really become very prominent to both law enforcement and prosecutors as we kind of see all the changes and how defendants are represented and also how they're incarcerated or, quite honestly, lack of incarcerated.
So clarify this for me. So somebody that had very poor financial means would get arrested and held, and that person wouldn't have access to even an attorney?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and again, this has never been a Livingston County or honestly a Monroe County problem. Downstate, there were times where someone was arrested and charged with a crime. Bail was set when it was sort of a free-for-all that the judges had complete discretion to set bail as they saw fit on criminal offenses. That obviously changed since 2020. So there were several instances where someone was arrested and charged with a crime, and they may have sat in jail without access to an attorney or a courtroom for a prolonged period of time. So they underwent this review to make sure that they had an attorney at every critical stage of the proceeding, which meant at first appearance. Unfortunately, they took it a lot farther and basically tried to cure the disparity between income that someone of financial means that could post bail and hire a lawyer would have versus someone who had no financial means, couldn't hire a lawyer, or couldn't instantly afford to post bail. So that's how we got to where we are today.
So ostensibly, there are people that are in jail and they're getting, they're serving time that they shouldn't be serving time because they ostensibly are innocent or they haven't had their day in court. And so a reaction was made to place this law, but from what you're telling me, it has unintended consequences.
Correct. There could have been an instance, say back in 2016, 2017, where a young man or young woman was charged with the crime of petty larceny. It's a Class A misdemeanor. By law, the most you could do is up to a year in jail. If they were held on that charge and bail was set, they may have done well past a year, potentially, rare occurrences, not in Livingston County, where they could have served 13, 14, 15, 16 months in jail on that petty larceny without access to either an attorney or the ability to go to court. So they tried to cure that in terms of getting everyone representation. Again, they went a step farther and basically made it so now that crime of petty larceny isn't even a jailable, qualifying, bailable offense. So that person would probably never even go to jail to begin with until they go to court. And that's what we're seeing now.
Now your challenges consequently would be a tad different than the challenges in Monroe County, right?
100%. I think in Livingston County, and again, the benefit of a small rural county is our defendants, whether it was pre-2020 bail reform or even post-2020 bail reform, have always had aggressive access to court. There's times if someone's held on bail, they get a bail application that same day or the next day. It's never been a Livingston County problem, whereas I can't speak to the problems downstate. I know Sandra Dorley in the Monroe County District Attorney's Office and all of law enforcement in Monroe County also very diligent about making sure defendants have access to court and access to representation.
Well, it seems like your flight risk would be a tad less here because people are living rurally and you know them and you know where they are. Is that
it is? But I think
true?
That's become a huge strain on our local law enforcement. So, for example, if someone from Buffalo is arrested and charged with a crime in Livingston County, they may or they would initially appear in front of a court in Livingston County, and they would have access to assigned counsel or an attorney at that appearance. The difficulty we have is there's no guarantee that once they're released from that court, which is most times mandated now, that they'll come back, or quite frankly, they'll even know where they're going. Some of our towns are pretty rustic, pretty rural, and if they don't ever step foot in that courtroom or truly know who their lawyer is, they just fail to appear, and our police are forced to chase them all across the state and sometimes all across neighboring states, trying to bring them back to the jurisdiction of our courts.
Well, I was a good friend of mine is Jim Van Bredroed, and he was the Gates police chief. He was talking about arresting somebody somewhere, I don't know, if somewhere around the airport or wherever it was, and they had all the drugs and whatever, and they took them in and whatever, and the guys from Georgia released. This guy's never coming back.
100%.
Right. So let's talk about that with this theoretical guy from Buffalo. Okay. So you arrest the guy, you give him an appearance ticket, he's from Buffalo, he never comes back here. Can you get him back here on a warrant? But
absolutely. So
you got to stop him when he passes a traffic light or something, right?
Correct. What could happen in that scenario is the Buffalo Police Department or the Amherst Police Department, whoever finds him at a traffic stop or in a domestic, wherever they may encounter him, they'll run his criminal history. They'll see there's a warrant, say, from the Village of Geneseo Court. They'll make arrangements with our county to contact us and say, we have Mr. Geneva here. Sorry, Dom. I can see you, so you're an easy example. We have Mr. Geneva here. Do you want to come get him? Sorry to do that to you.
No, I've been accused of many things before, but never skipping bail.
But again, in that scenario, it becomes very difficult for, say, the Livingston County Sheriff or the Geneseo Police Department, where they're forced to send their officer to Buffalo. Buffalo is forced to detain this person pending the arrival of Livingston County law enforcement. And you could see where even when we bring them back, it's probably still not jailable. They appear in front of a judge and they get sent back to Buffalo. And now we're in the same cycle.
Oh my God. We live in a different world. Well, we're heading to our first break, and I have a lot of questions for you. Well, right after the break. This is Dom Geneva for my friend Jim Shelley, owner of Fanatics Pub and Blue Stage in Lima. This week, March 3rd, Jim hosts Selwyn Birchwood, a nationally known guitarist. Problem is, it's sold out. I warned you. But next week on Friday, March 8th, he's hosting Houses of the Holy, a Led Zeppelin tribute band, and there's still tickets left. Led Zeppelin, it's like the soundtrack of my college days. I'll be there, table 22. Get your tickets before they're gone. Log on to fanaticspub.com. This section of the No Nonsense Roundtable is brought to you by, well, the No Nonsense Roundtable. You see, at the No Nonsense Roundtable, we do marketing for different organizations, and let me give you an example. Here's an ad that we did for the Rotary Sunshine Camp just recently, and it was voiced by Don Alhart.
It's a magical place for kids of all abilities.
At no charge, the Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp has been serving children of all abilities for the last 100 years. Help us grow into the next 100 years. Go to sunshinecamp.org to learn more about how you can help.
Where kids have no barriers to fun.
The Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp.
We do all sorts of things, mainly for smaller companies. So if you'd like to investigate the possibility of us doing some work for you, contact me at nononsenseroundtable.com. Well, welcome back. We're talking to Greg McCaffrey, who is the district attorney of Livingston County, and some topics are very general and some topics are very specific. Let me just go into a couple of questions that I have. I mean, some of these things that you had, like retail theft years ago. You didn't have this smash and grab stuff and all the stuff you have now. I mean, it seems like crimes are actually morphing. It's sort of like I don't know. It's changing and mixing together with this and that and the other thing. And I mean, but you don't have that much of that in Livingston County, right? I mean,
we do at our big box stores. It's kind of ironic that you speak of that now. Right before I left my office to come see you, I was watching a video of a retail theft at Walmart in Geneseo, and you could see a lot of times now that, again, the consequences for their actions don't really fit the crime. So if someone were to go steal, say, 10 large screen TVs and is caught, that's not a qualifying jailable offense. So I guess the reward is you get away with 10 big box TVs. The risk is you get caught, you get arrested, you get an appearance ticket, and you have a court date that you may or may not make. So I think that's the difficulty that we're facing right now. It becomes kind of a vicious chase cycle. So I think that's been kind of the unintended consequences of some of these reforms. Whereas if that person before was caught, they're arrested, they're incarcerated. Again, I fully support access to an attorney and rights along that front. But now all of a sudden to be like, look, my life is put on hold. I have kids, or I have a job, or I have responsibilities I might not be able to tend to because I'm incarcerated. Now, the worst they're going to do is they're going to catch me and they're going to give me a new court date.
Right. I have a good friend of mine who said, he said, I went to the store the other day and they're locking up the merchandise instead of locking up the criminals.
And it's 100% true. So I guess it goes back to, if you get caught enough times, there's probably consequences. And that's where, again, we beg the state legislature, we beg the governor's office to just allow the judges to be more fact intensive when they're looking at setting bail on somebody. Again, I fully support defendants' rights. I fully support access to representation. But again, there are people trying to make an honest living. There are businesses trying to make a profit. There's a society that has to be held accountable for their actions, and that's not happening right now.
So being in Livingston County, you have all these towns and whatever. So has the incidence of warrants gone up dramatically in these towns or not over the past couple of years?
Oh, 100%. Because again, what we've done in Livingston County, again, a little bit what I call a solution where there wasn't a problem. We now have an arraignment or initial appearance court that takes place in the county jail twice a day.
Oh, really?
7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So for you, and again, I'm a York native, so York's always near and dear to my heart. If I were, say, arrested for driving while intoxicated in the town of York, I probably get arraigned or formally charged in the Livingston County Jail in Geneseo with a date to appear in the Yorktown court, a court that I may not know where it is, an attorney I may not know who it is, just general direction. So I'm never actually going in front of the York judge till I voluntarily appear there. That's kind of the unintended consequences of the solution to the problem we didn't have.
So you're bringing the arraignment to the jail rather than having to transport the suspect to the court. So that's cutting out a step, right?
Correct. And again, from law enforcement's perspective, and again, it goes back to the Geneseo police officers having to chase someone to, say, Buffalo on a warrant. Now, instead of them having to transport somebody to court and sitting on them, they're just taking them to the jail. So again, I think that's where law enforcement had to make a decision. Where do we spend our resources? Now, arrests in Livingston County are direct deposit prior to arraignment at the jail. So the officers go back on patrol, probably to chase the defendants who aren't appearing in court. So yeah, it's just really difficult that, you get that DWI in York, the York judge, the judge elected by the York residents, probably isn't hearing that case at first appearance.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of these offenses are not jailable anymore, like drug offenses, right?
There's very few cases that are of not violent offenses that are jailable now. I don't want to educate your audience. I know it's a very well-to-do audience. There's a lot of offenses that are 100% catch and release under almost all circumstances.
Well, the thing is, the irony here is that if you get caught with an illegal gun, okay, that's a problem. But you can get caught with 100 pounds of fentanyl, right? Which is more lethal than the gun.
Correct.
But you virtually can't do anything about it, right?
And again, that goes to the risk reward that, look, I'm driving Route 390 and I have a car full of drugs. The worst thing that's going to happen to me is I get caught, you take my drugs, I get a new court date that I may or may not make. So that's kind of I'm not a businessman in the markets of narcotics trafficking, but is that a risk you're willing to take? You may lose your drugs, but you're going home that next day, one way or the other. Again, there's a lot of other variables about your past record and parole and probation, things along that line. But a first-time drug offender with that amount of fentanyl, yeah, you're going home.
Well, it seems like Sheriff Doherty does a pretty good job on 390. I see the press releases. He's always catching people on 390. I mean, when are people going to realize that they maybe should take the back roads?
Well, and credit to Sheriff Doherty and credit to our county law enforcement. When they push them off 390, they'll work the back roads too, because again, that's the benefit of smoke. And again, all law enforcement, I think throughout New York State, they didn't want these solutions and these things that are created. The kind of back the blue movement. These are just honest, hardworking men and women that are doing the best they can with a deck completely stacked against them.
Oh yeah, Sheriff Todd Baxter said something on the show one day, and he said, they're taking away the honor from being in law enforcement. He says, and other people will tell you, years ago you used to go, and he was saying you used to go to a crime scene, and the police would show up, and everybody would scatter. Says now it seems there's a whole different culture. They're challenging the police officers.
Oh, the disrespect that law enforcement has is I've never seen anything so horrific in my life. That police are not respected from, starting at teenagers, starting at elementary kids. It used to be, when we were kids, my father being a trooper, I want to be a police officer. You wanted to hug a police, you wanted to shake a police officer. Thank you so much for your service. Like how we treat our military now. Now it's kind of like, just the disrespect. They don't trust police. They don't like police. And it's just, it really is very sad state of our community. And honestly, good people don't want to be police officers anymore.
Well, I see that when something happens bad, how infrequent it is, people group together and they have support wherever their cause is. I don't care what the cause is, but there doesn't seem to be the same thing for law enforcement. There should be a law enforcement. There should be a Bill's Mafia for police enforcement, for police people, and you just don't see anybody sticking their head up saying, "Hey, yeah, right, let's do a GoFundMe for this or do this for that." Individual who came in and risked his life. We had Denny Wright on the show a couple of months ago, and here's a guy who got blinded, by his suspect, and he can't see anything now, and his attitude is still, well, you know what? That's what I do for a living.
Well, that's why I commend anyone that goes into law enforcement, because I think the day you go into that profession, you realize the hope is to come home. I don't think that's ever been truer than it is now. I even look back, with my father when I was a kid, growing up with him going to work every day. It never truly dawned on me the dangerous work he did and that he might not come home. If now I was a kid, knowing what I know, I probably wouldn't want to let my father out that door.
Yeah.
Knowing what he was walking into. And that's how I feel about all of our law enforcement. Again, it's in the thought that they don't get rewarded for their work, the fact that they get disrespected for their work. And again, I'll turn it even to, it gets worse in my opinion to, well, I guess it can't get worse. The victims of criminal offenses. So the police are suffering and the victims are suffering. And for me as a prosecutor, I kind of get buried by both. The police are upset. The victims are upset. And it's just like, they're the laws. I may not agree with them. I may not like them. I'm trying to work within them the best I can.
Well, we're about ready to head into a news break, but I'm going to play a little clip from somebody in law enforcement who has an opinion about whose fault it really is. And we're going to do that right after the break. This is Dom Genova for my friends at Valley Fuel. It was decades ago that Phil Saunders called me up and said he was starting a new company, Valley Fuel. And man, I got to tell you, this has been a great experience. If you're looking for affordable propane or home heating oil, contact Valley Fuel. If you want reliable delivery, contact Valley Fuel. If you want to do business with a local company, contact Valley Fuel. If you want to find out how to contact Valley Fuel, go to valleyfuels.com or your No Nonsense Roundtable. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here with Livingston County District Attorney Greg McCaffrey, and I promised you that I was going to play a little clip from somebody who, made a statement about who's really responsible for the increase in crime. And his name is Grady Judd. He is the no-nonsense sheriff of Polk County, Florida. And we're going to play this for you. It's only a minute or two, but he's pretty articulate.
You know what I coach here when I go around to the neighborhood meetings and the retirement meetings and meet the new people. I said, look, we welcome you here with open arms. We're glad that you're here. But if you came here for warm weather in the winter, we have it. If you came here for a low crime rate, we have it. If you came here for low taxes, we have it. But listen, if you come here and vote the same way the majority of the people voted from where you came from, you'll still have warm weather in the winter. But you won't have low taxes and low crime, because every one of the areas across this nation that have a high crime rate can look directly at their mayors, their city commissioners, their county commissioners, their legislators in the Senate or the House. Those rules are and the governors. Those rules are created that's allowing the criminals to run wild on top of everybody and steal and shoot and stab and murder. Well, how's that working for y'all? Our crime's at a 50-year low in my county, and it's not safe to walk the streets. And you're creating that environment by the people you put in office.
Right. So ultimately, the consequences of your own behavior is the consequences of the voters' behavior. You're saying it rests on our shoulders who are pulling that lever in November.
Well, it absolutely does. When you look at the people who you vote for, they're polished and they tell you a good story, but don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. And at the end of the day, and I say this in all honesty, the policies or practices, or as you may understand them as laws, that are in place that allow this crime to occur are because of the people you put in public office. Think about it. New York has no jail bail. Well, how does that work? If you arrest someone and they are not held responsible or accountable and they get right back out, my experience tells you the majority of them don't show up, and they're certainly not concerned with whether or not they commit more crime because nobody's held them accountable.
So, Greg, not too much to disagree with that, right?
Those are profound words, Dom.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's sort of like even raising your kids. You get consequences of their behavior, if there's no consequences. And the other thing he goes on to say a little bit later in that interview, he says is it encourages other people to mimic the behavior. If somebody gets away with X, then X's friend gets away with the same thing. He doesn't see any consequences to it. But you're talking about elected officials and what they come up with, and the law of unintended consequences is the worst law of all, as I always say. But now we have the some people in office that are trying to maybe backtrack or change things or whatever. So talk to me about the governor's plan with this retail task force. I mean, you have, all of a sudden now, this smash and grab thing that now they're paying attention to it, but I don't see. Educate me. What's going on with that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not overly familiar with what Governor Hochul is attempting to do with that. I think honestly that there's financial implications with all the retail theft, and I think that's what has Albany's attention at this time. But again, it's the same, the way the law is, the way the bail is, that a lot of the theft provisions, the grand larcenies, the petty larcenies, as non-qualified offenses, that I wouldn't say there's incentive to steal, but there's no consequences to steal or consequences when you steal. So I think that's where that has, because now you have economic impacts on the state. I think that's why the governor's office and the state Senate and the state assembly are starting to look at that a little closer.
Well, and talk about unintended consequences, this legalization of marijuana, and that created a black market back when. Is it still pretty strong of a black market with that or not?
It is. I think the difficulty that we find is everyone thinks and the misconceptions about what's legal, what's not legal, and who can have these head shops, who can legally sell marijuana. I think there's just mass confusion about marijuana's legal. Where can I get it? Who can sell it? How much can I have on my property? What else can I do surrounding marijuana? So again, I think the whole rollout of that was, I guess, improperly conveyed to the public. I know for us, even our law enforcement and people, attorneys within my own office, don't truly understand the legalization of marijuana to this day and the different shops you see. We run into quite a few difficulties in our county with the mom and pop smoke shops that are coming up and what they're allowed to sell versus what they're not supposed to sell. And again, that's putting a strain on our local code enforcement officers as well, because suddenly you have, Geneseo's a college town. So suddenly you have all these mom and pop smoke shops coming up. What really can they sell? What legally should they be selling? And there's really not a lot of guidance to local law enforcement and local businesses about what you can and can't do. And of course, going back to your kind of theme of the day about lack of accountability, the people selling it, the people buying it, no punishments, they can get away with whatever they want. So quite frankly, they don't care.
Right. With all the other stuff you have going on, somebody selling some of the stuff under the counter, in the great scheme of things, it's not like somebody doing these carjackings and stuff that we see. Maybe not so much in Livingston County, but it's got to be a scary situation in some of these neighborhoods.
It is, and I think honestly, the biggest thing that we've always pushed for as both law enforcement but also prosecutors is just to allow localities to do more of their own governance, whether it's through the judges with the bail, businesses. Because again, Geneseo and Livingston County and Avon are remarkably different than Manhattan or Albany County and things. So like for us, the catch and release of Livingston County, the people never coming to court that never happened before, those problems can be fixed and cured within Livingston County. It truly isn't a one size fits all. Like our problems in Livingston County aren't Sandra Dorley and Sheriff Baxter's problems in Monroe, and they surely aren't the problems of Erie County or downtown Buffalo. So that's what we've kind of asked for, to be like, look, if we allow someone who steals from Walmart and Geneseo over and over and over to be incarcerated, they will have access to an attorney. They will have access to court. They will have some measure of accountability. They're not being deprived of any rights. Whereas I understand maybe if that happens in, say, Manhattan or the Bronx, they may get arrested and charged. They may sit in a jail for a period of time. I don't know what happens down there. So their issues aren't our issues. We want it kind of laws are laws, but give the discretion and the authority and the autonomy of locally elected officials to know what's best for their community.
I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between a sheriff and a police chief.
Yeah, probably not. No, I wouldn't think so. Like for us, the sheriff, the Livingston County sheriffs probably have, 85, 90% of the cases in Livingston County, the criminal cases. But we also have the benefit of having a presence of the New York State Police. We have several villages have police chief and local village agencies. But again, they're all understaffed. They're all underfunded. And again, this bail reform, criminal justice reform, lack of accountability has now stretched them in ways that no one ever envisioned. For two members of a local police department to have to go 4 hours each way to pick up a warrant suspect, suddenly they're not in that municipality doing traffic patrol, being seen in the schools, being the closest car in the event there is actual crime in that community. So again, it's like I say, the theme of the day, unintended consequences. That what have we done? We are creating more and more and more problems, yet we fixed nothing. We've made it worse.
Well, and Grady Judd said there, and ultimately you have to change things at the top. And that takes education. It takes people actually getting off their duff and voting, and people making these things a part of their decision when they decide to go this party or that party, and which compels the other question. You're a Democrat with a little d. You're not. Yeah, I would say there's Republicans with a big R, Republicans with a little r. You're a Democrat with a little d. I'm always fascinated by the fact that district attorneys, judges belong to a party, because it's kind of counterintuitive. You're supposed to be absolutely fair. You're not supposed to let your personal political opinions get into your way. I feel that from seeing you work all these years, you're like that. You don't let your own personal feelings affect you. But what's your feeling about that whole thing? It's just kind of a crazy concept to me.
It is, and you are 100% spot on. For me, in 2012, when I first became Livingston County District Attorney, that's my first venture into, I guess, for lack of a better word, politics. And I was in it for about 3 days before I wanted out. I'm a prosecutor. I've always been a prosecutor. Same thing with the judges. I'm in a courtroom almost every day, and it's something where my political party, judge me on my actions, not on a label. Because when you say little d, and I've been elected 3 times in Livingston County. I've had conservative lines. I've had Democrat lines. I've had independent lines. Never once has any of my political affiliations or political labels affected anything I do in the courtroom.
Yeah, I can see that. I have a Mario Cuomo quote when we come back from this break that addresses that. So, we'll see after the break. This segment of the No Nonsense Roundtable is brought to you by McClure, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Chevy, and Buick in Perry. Hey, all new car dealers pay the same price for their new cars and trucks. There's no volume discount. So your buying decision now comes down to price and ease of doing business. Family owned for generations, you'll find John McClure himself there in the dealerships day to day, and you get a great no-nonsense deal you'll be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. Contact them at McClure-ChryslerDodgeJeep.com or simply go to NoNonsenseRoundtable.com to connect with them. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking to Greg McCaffrey, who is the Livingston County District Attorney. And we were talking about being a judge or a district attorney and running for office, and Republican and Democrat. And I was saying he was a Democrat with a little d. The thing that I remember, it was years and years ago, Mario Cuomo came to Livingston County. And he was talking to a group of people. He says, I'm running for office. I know. He says, I know you guys are all Republicans. Your hands would get palsy if you had to go to the spot on the ballot that said a D on it. He says, I got that. He says, but I'm going to talk to you anyway. And I thought that was always a very self-deprecating and wonderful attitude that he had, Mario.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I always look back, like you talk about like judges and say prosecutors, even law enforcement. Like my job is to do justice, not to win at any cost, to make sure the right thing gets done. So I always say the right decision is rarely the popular decision. And again, I always find as though politics, you try to please your party or please your special interests. For me, I have to make sure I balance the defendant's rights, their presumption of innocence, what the victim needs and is entitled to, what law enforcement sees, and then to be kind of the gatekeeper of justice. So if I go in there with a liberal vent to be like, everyone needs to just go, drugs are fine, drugs are legal, everyone should have drugs, then I'm a horrible prosecutor. Same time, a lot of times in Livingston County, very rural, very, a little more right-leaning, for lack of a better term, very pro-Second Amendment. The little d that I've been labeled with to be like, well, he must be anti-Second Amendment if he's a Democrat, and be like, judge me on my actions, not on a label. To be like, I am fully supportive of the Second Amendment, fully supportive of lawful gun owners and their rights. But at the same time, if the laws provide punishments for illegal activities with guns, or the law requires certain registration, certain capacity limits, certain things that I may personally disagree with, that's not my right as district attorney. I have selective enforcement. I have selective discretion, but I have to balance the interests of what is the law and what is best for the people of Livingston County.
One of the questions that kind of is unresolved here with this bail reform thing is that some people are saying that the judges don't have any discretion at all, and some are saying they have a lot of discretion whether to hold somebody or not. I guess that in a theoretical sense, somebody hijacks a car, does it 4 or 5 times, then there is some common sense that would say, no, this guy has to have high bail. We're going to keep him in jail. And there's a question whether the judge has the ability to do that or not. Can you comment on that?
Well, I can give an example from a case several years ago. We have, again, at our centralized arraignment part, again, the arraignment court in the Livingston County Jail. We had a gentleman who actually stole a car. He was arrested and he was charged and he was taken to court and he was released. It's what New York State calls a non-qualifying offense in that instance. It's not entitled to bail. So it's mandatory release. You're arrested, arraigned, with a date to appear in a future court appearance. He leaves the jail that morning in the village of Geneseo and goes and steals another car. And he did this 2 times in a row. Catch, release, steal a car. Arrested, jailed, release, steals a car. When we finally caught him, we actually ended up having to go faster than him. We ended up getting him jailed on the first stolen car as opposed to the third stolen car. So how illogical that sounds, that because he was arrested for a new felony while at liberty for a prior felony, we were able to get bail set on the first one, on the former felony, which again, fine. That's the law. That's how we applied it. That's how we made it work. But as a prosecutor, as law enforcement, so you get arrested on a Monday, you get arrested again on Tuesday, you get arrested again on Wednesday, we're going to go back and hold you on the one on Monday. But we have to have a hearing, an evidentiary hearing. We have to call witnesses. We have to gather evidence. We have to go to court. So again, nothing in a court is what I would deem a waste of time. Court it's a mandatory function. But now we've chased this guy. 3 people have had their cars stolen. And now we're going back to the first person and say, I might need you to testify, or I might need the police officer to testify. And I need you now, immediately, or this person's going to get out. It's just kind of counterintuitive. And that's why people lose confidence in the justice system to be like, my car, how about the poor 2 other people got their car stolen? Why was this guy out?
Or in a domestic violence thing. I mean, that's the other side of that.
And again, that's a really big issue in Livingston County, because it's something, if I'm involved in a domestic, and again, I won't throw you under the bus this time, I'll take it on myself. If I get in such a heated exchange with my wife that I'm arrested for a domestic assault, sometimes a little bit of time in jail, that cooling off period, Or honestly, a lot of times when I go to jail, I'm going to get released and they're going to issue an order of protection. I may not have a place to go. So now suddenly I'm angry and I'm displaced, and something worse is going to happen. So again, it is sometimes a little cooling off period to just kind of settle, make a call to a family member, get the kids situated, kind of maybe sober up or detox, whatever the situation is. Again, in Livingston County, we can monitor our own. Sandra Dorley, Todd Baxter, Monroe County can monitor their own. This one size does not fit all, and we're creating more and more and more problems.
Does the judge have the capacity to say, this guy needs a night on ice, and can actually do that or not?
We can only detain them for so long under the law. So it's something, if I'm involved in a domestic tonight at 8 p.m., I'm going to likely see a judge tomorrow morning at 7.
Okay.
But if it's a mandatory release, it's 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. I'm walking out of that front door of the jail. I may be in a very emotional, volatile state. And I've been told by a judge who isn't even elected by the jurisdiction where my case is pending, you can't go home. Here's a piece of paper. This piece of paper is not going to stop me from doing what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I'm in a bad spot. Whereas let's hold them a little bit, maybe get some counseling, get some services, have an attorney talk, get a social worker, allow me as the prosecutor to call the victim and be like, hey, by the way, when you called the police last night, very brave, very stoic, at 7:30, and they came and they arrested your abuser, he's going to be out in 12 hours. I can't call that person at 3 a.m. I don't have their information. I don't have the staff. I have 7 attorneys. So suddenly now the victim is being put in a bad spot, and the victim loses faith.
Right, and if they're not in the system, they can't get the drug help or whatever. You know, you have things that are available. Bob Duffy was saying that last week. You have these resources that are available, but they're not in the system. They can't avail themselves of those.
And that's it. That's why when they pass all these laws, it's kind of the same. Let the system work. They've made it so we're always chasing defendants, chasing victims, trying to impose consequences well after the fact. And it's become, I don't want this all to be doom and gloom, because I love my job. I love what I do. I would never choose to do anything else. And same thing with, I'm sure, most police officers, but it's very deflating. And and for the victims and for our society, it's just tough because we didn't have to get to this point.
Well, we only have a couple of seconds left. So last words?
Just thank you for bringing these issues up, because again, I want people to call the police. I want people to respect the police. Our system will work. It just needs some changes.
And when it comes to November, on your list of things to do is think about the people who are making these laws and vote for the people that you know are going to make the tough decisions to do the right thing.
These are important issues, and you should be contacting all your elected officials to let them know that these issues are important and they matter.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. We're going to have you back again before years pass by. So
I would love that. Always a pleasure.
All right, next week, same time, same place. It's the No Nonsense Roundtable.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every weekend from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.